stand by, ready our program sounds now.
Hello and welcome to today's event. My name is Jack and I'll be reviewing a few technical items before we get started. First, we'd like to take a minute before today's discussion begins to review Urban Green's organizational values. Urban Green Council uses these organizational values to guide our work, and as a part of our commitment to fostering inclusive and respectful dialogue, we ask that all meeting participants remain mindful of these values during our discussion. Thank you. If you are having any technical difficulties today, please email contact@urbangreencouncil.org and we'll try to get you sorted as quickly as possible. Finally, if you'd like to submit questions, please do so via the Slido box below your video screen. You can upvote any questions and we'll try to answer as many as possible during the second half of today's event. Alternatively, you can access Slido on your phone by visiting slido.com and entering the code UGLive. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, John Mandyke, to get us started.
Thank you, Jack, and welcome everybody. Welcome to Urban Green Live. I'm your host, John Mandyke, the CEO of Urban Green, coming to you from Studio Urban Green in Lower Manhattan. This is a program series where I'll be interviewing global experts to better understand how we get to a zero carbon future. And you get to participate too, because we're going to have live Q&A in just a bit, as Jack mentioned. So today, I'm really excited. We're going to take a look at the future of carbon policies for buildings in New York City, straight from the source. My guest is Ben Furnas. He's the director of the Mayor's Office for Climate and Sustainability and a new board member at Urban Green. Ben, welcome to Urban Green Live.
Hey, thanks so much, John. It's really lovely to be here, and thanks so much for everything that Urban Green does. You guys are real leaders in this space.
Great, thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. So let's dive right into it. Local Law 97 is on everybody's mind with the first compliance period just 2 years away. So let's start with kind of the big picture. How do you see the law unfolding?
That's a great question, John, and I'm keenly aware that it's something that is on top of mind for a lot of people. You know, Local Law 97 was part of the Climate Mobilization Act, some of the most ambitious and far-reaching pieces of legislation on building emissions really anywhere in the world. And you know, over the next couple of months and really in the next couple of years, we're going to be implementing and doing all of the rulemakings and clarifications associated with bringing that law into reality. You know, right now it's a law on a piece of paper, but we want to quickly be moving to getting the changes done in the entire building stock that need to happen. There's an incredible group of folks that's being convened by the New York City Department of Buildings, the Local Law 97 Advisory Board, some of the world leading experts on building decarbonization, and they're working diligently to make sure building owners understand what they need to do in order to come into compliance with the law and keep the pieces moving so we can be sort of racing towards that zero carbon future that you talked about. So by mid-century, we're hoping to have a carbon neutral city, and buildings are going to be a major part of that. One thing I would say is that building owners really should feel like they are not alone in this. You know, the Mayor's Office of Climate and Sustainability recently launched the NYC Accelerator program, which is really designed to provide technical assistance and access to incentives associated with making the changes that we're hoping to see in buildings. And we recently launched the Commercial PACE program, Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing, which is going to be a terrific new tool for building owners to get access to financing in order to make the types of deep retrofits that we think are crucial to sort of meeting our really ambitious climate goals. And at every step of the way, you know, Urban Green Council has been an incredible convener and partner in all this work, and it's terrific to see all of New York City coming together to work towards these goals.
Yeah, I'll echo your thoughts on PACE. It's great to see the program up and running and the first loan out there. So that's certainly a big piece of the puzzle and an important tool to use. And I'll also echo your thoughts on the advisory board. They're working so hard, a great group of people. But in that advisory board process, you know, how would you advise them, or how would you advise the city to think about density under Local Law 97? You know, you and I have talked about this before. You know, density is one of these challenges. What we're seeing is the buildings that don't comply typically have this density element. Typically, density can be your friend for sustainability. It's a challenge for Local Law 97. How do you think we should think about that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you know, obviously, I'm keenly aware that sort of stepping back, huge part of why folks in New York City are able to live such relatively low carbon lives is because, we live in multi-unit apartment buildings. We commute to work on a highly efficient electric mode of conveyance that we call the subway system. And so, merely by having economic activity and folks living in New York City, that in and of itself is climate action. So obviously anything we do, we don't want to stop the ability of New York City to grow, because urban growth is sustainable growth in lots of ways. Specifically on how it interacts with local law 97, I think one thing that's going to be happening in the next short time period here is a really sharpening of the use categories that end up having particular targets associated with them. So there's a couple of categories now, but there's a process in place to add a lot more categories. So folks, individual use types have a target that's maybe more granular and focused on the use that is actually going on in a particular building or in a particular sector. My hope is, and I think a lot of the folks on the working group are thinking really deeply about this, that level of granularity and sharpening is going to alleviate some of these concerns. But more broadly, each and every one of us and all of the sectors of the economy have both an obligation and under local law 97 a sort of legal responsibility to be looking for ways to improve the efficiency of their operations. The International Energy Agency recently put out a pathways to carbon neutrality by the middle of the next century, and they describe it as a narrow but achievable goal. And if you look at all the sectors that they identify as needing to rush towards decarbonization, every business activity, every building system needs to be reflecting and looking at the ways they can be improving emissions and reducing energy use and getting energy from ever cleaner sources of electricity. And so no one is going to be, it behooves all of us to be taking as aggressive action as we can, because these goals are challenging. But on some basic level, they're going to be what is needed in order to achieve the carbon neutral future that's necessary for the, it sounds a little cheesy and dramatic sometimes, but it's genuinely the sort of future of humanity and our ability to live safely on this small sliver of habitable space that we call Earth.
Those special use categories that you talked about, do you envision them capturing data centers and supermarkets? Those are, and bodegas, those are other categories that we're seeing that are throwing buildings particularly over the cap just because of the intensity of that need, which provides a societal value.
Yeah, our hope is that it will provide a sharper clarity for use types like that. And on some basic level, right, we want to be making sure that individual economic uses are being held towards aggressive standards that are appropriate for that economic use, right? We don't want to be holding a supermarket to the same standard as something that is just providing a different use or providing a different value. But we think it's important for supermarkets to be looking at what are the most efficient supermarkets doing and how can we be adopting those practices and pushing the envelope a little bit in order to achieve the emission reductions we're looking for. So we don't want to be unfair to people, but we want to have high expectations for all of us as we try to race towards this lower carbon future.
Right. Urban Green has been working with you in the mayor's office on the carbon trading study that was required under local law 97. Any update on the study and when the findings might be out?
Yeah, so it's something our office is working diligently on, and we're hoping to release something later this year. As you know, it's a hugely complicated undertaking to think about what a carbon trading system could look like. But I do think the exercise of thinking about what something could look like has raised a lot of really interesting possibilities about ways to improve the way buildings are decarbonizing and think about potential next steps to go even further and deeper. So I really thank you for your partnership on that, and we look forward to further conversations on that.
Great. Let me switch to another topic, but related. So in May, legislation was introduced at the City Council to ban fossil fuels in new construction and major renovation. How do you see that issue moving forward?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that both the mayor has expressed a desire to see us put an end date on fossil fuel usage in new buildings. And I genuinely think it's something that, all the way up to the International Energy Agency, the White House, folks thinking about this on a national level, I think we all sort of see the writing on the wall and see that the future of buildings is one that relies far less on fossil fuels. I think the exciting thing is that New York City can really lead the way here. I mean, as you well know, we have some of the most creative and thoughtful and innovative real estate developers on the planet, and they think really hard about how to create high quality spaces for people to live and work in. And I think we could really be a leader here if we sort of set some goals for ourselves and think about a date after which all new buildings would not rely on fossil fuels for their sort of basic building heating needs. So we think it's an exciting possibility, and really looking forward to working with the council and the advocates, but really also the sort of most innovative developers who are thinking about these technologies and making them sort of industry practice going forward.
Great. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will. So is this an issue you think that gets done this year with this mayor and this council, or does this trickle over?
I think we'd like to. I think, it's interesting. I think there would be a lot of benefit in having a date certain as soon as possible so people can start planning and thinking about this. And I think it behooves us and the utilities as they think about the future planning of what the electricity demand will be, and all developers who are thinking about building buildings and getting things into the design phase. It's something we're really interested in seeing move forward this year. And it's something that we're going to be working with industry and the council and anyone else to sort of move this forward. We think it's an exciting possibility, and we think it's the way it's the direction that the world is going, to be honest. And I think we'd rather get out ahead of it and lead the way here, because I think it would set us all up for success in the future.
Okay, well, that was fossil fuels. Let's switch and talk about the electric grid side of energy. What's the city's role to decarbonize the electric grid?
We have a couple of different roles to play. Obviously, a major piece of this is our decisions that are made by the NYCO and the Public Service Commission and entities, regulatory entities at the state level. But we are participants in a lot of those proceedings. We advocate for much greater transmission into the 5 boroughs, cleaning up the grid overall. And, as the mayor has talked about, we have a real role to play in our purchasing power. New York City government operations consumes a fair bit of electricity, a non-trivial fraction of the total amount of electricity that gets used in the 5 boroughs. And by partnering with NYSERDA or others to bring high quality, clean and renewable source of electricity into the 5 boroughs, we think we can sort of play our role in cleaning up the grid and accelerating towards the really ambitious goals that the state has set to get a clean and renewable grid as soon as possible. This is really the goal of the entire country right now, and really the entire world, to shift as many things as possible to electricity, and then get our electricity from as many clean and renewable and zero carbon sources as we can. That's wind, solar, and hydropower, and transmission line and battery storage is going to play a huge role in that as well, as you well know.
Talk to me about how you see the city working with the federal government and vice versa on this.
I think it's so exciting and so refreshing to see an administration and really a whole of government approach from the feds right now. It's such a sea change from the federal dynamics that we were experiencing just a year ago. And I think it's a very powerful opportunity for us to be, working with the federal government to shape both things on the administrative side through the Department of Energy or their other partners there, and with the Senate. I mean, there's obviously a major infrastructure bill that's being considered now, and any major action on climate that the Senate can take will be hugely helpful for all of our goals, whether it's supporting the adoption of electric vehicles or heat pumps or major new sources of funds for transmission or to clean up the grid, new incentives for renewable electricity, encouraging, making it easier for folks to be siting and developing renewable source of electricity, support for buildings as they make the transformations that they're looking to make. And I think we're in communication with both the legislators and the executive branch across different agencies to move our pieces forward. But just having a partner in the feds is transformative, and so much of what we aspire to do is going to only be possible because of really aggressive federal action. But the best we can do is really to prepare prepare the 5 boroughs, advocate for what we need, and get ready for the transformations that we're all looking for.
So we've been talking about transitions. These are major transitions that have to happen
Yep.
for us to get to net zero carbon. How do we ensure that that disadvantaged New Yorkers aren't negatively impacted by these big transitions? And in fact, how do we make sure they benefit from it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think this is a core question, and it's core to a lot of the work we do. You know, just this year, the mayor talked about putting together a environmental justice for all report, and that's something that our office is doing, making sure that we're using every lever at our disposal to both bring voices into the process that have been historically left out, and make sure that all of the work of this energy transition, not just, as you said, does no harm to folks, but really provides new opportunities. You know, a real positive dynamic for so much of what we talk about when we talk about climate action creates the possibility of having much better quality of life and an opportunity to correct inequities in the here and now. So whether it's transforming a building system so it doesn't rely on fossil fuels and instead it relies on much cleaner sources of energy, whether it's electricity or cleaner fuel that they end up using to improve the indoor air quality in a building, or whether it's providing a new opportunity or a job to folks who are looking for new opportunities in this sort of growing clean energy economy. So we think there's a lot of really exciting confluence of interests in all of this, and it's really exciting to see so many organizations across the 5 boroughs embracing the energy transition and working with us to think about how this can really be something that benefits everyone across every neighborhood in the city.
So on Earth Day, Ben, the mayor announced the concept of a city utility for geothermal energy.
Yeah.
Tell me, what do you think the potential is for geothermal in New York?
We're really excited about this. We have a lot of big ambitions here. We think there are thousands of blocks across the city that have the potential for something that would feel like a district geothermal system. And just fundamentally, the notion that we would be tapping into the cool and comfortable or warm, depending on the season, air right below the surface of the earth in order to heat and cool our buildings and provide an alternative to fossil fuel heat or electric cooling or sort of grid-based cooling. It's a really powerful notion. And we really feel like we should be letting 1,000 flowers bloom. We think there's a role for the city to come in and maybe own and provide some amount of geothermal capacity for private buildings. We think individual building owners can be looking for just systems that they could tap into. We think about folks who have either campuses or other types of groups of buildings that might be able to benefit from a geothermal system. And we really hope that the city can be in a position to be supporting all of these types of things. And if part of that includes a geothermal utility that the city operates, that's one really exciting model we're looking at. We also know that the existing utilities are thinking about ways that they could be offering ground source heat pumps or geothermal style systems as well. And so, this is really an additive dynamic. We're looking to play a role. We hope lots of other folks play a role. And it's a great example of how Local Law 97 and the carbon emission targets that we've all set for ourselves are spurring all of this creativity and different tools and ways that building owners can be helping to move us towards those targets. We see it as very exciting.
Great. And so a utility like that, how would it actually work?
Yeah, so we're right now going through a study process to identify city sites that could potentially provide essentially a heat sink or a cooling sink for neighboring private buildings. And the notion of the city runs one pretty large utility. It's not going to be exactly analogous, but we obviously run the water system, and folks can tap into water services, both clean water and wastewater, and they receive clean water, they pay a bill, and we're sort of in a relationship like that. We think there's a possibility for a structure like that the city could provide, but we're really just at the beginning of this journey, right? We're looking at the possibilities. We're going to be working with the city council if there's a particular authorization that we need for the city to be playing a role like this, and we really look forward to working with everyone to see what the possibilities are here. Though we think the technology is very promising, and there's a lot of great models around the world, and we think some of the institutional structural challenges that keep an individual building from adopting this could be unlocked if the city played a role in bringing private entities together and providing a service in a district level way.
Great, and I guess last question on this topic. So do you see kind of demonstration projects as a next step, and what would be the timeline for that?
Yeah, we're hoping to identify some geographies by the end of the year that folks who are interested in potentially receiving this type of service, and we could be moving forward with some demonstrations, or really a first phase of this work, and then scaling up over time as we go forward. But we're hoping to have a lot more to say this year.
Great. So I see the audience is already sending in a lot of questions. Please use the Slido function. We're going to get to those in a few minutes. Ben, let's talk about buildings under 25,000 square feet, which are not subject to Local Law 97. They make up just under half of the New York City buildings' emissions. So how is the city thinking about that? How do we drive emissions reductions in that sector?
That's a great question. And I think the NYC Accelerator program that I mentioned right now has a pretty broad and extensive technical support function for buildings of that size, the sort of smaller apartment buildings all the way down into single family homes. And we know that there's going to be a lot of changes in the years ahead, depending on how the cost effectiveness of heat pumps, for example, and solar and electric vehicle technologies. All of these things are going to be targeted towards some of these smaller buildings. And we'd like to play a role both to support them in making the changes that they need, and also advocating for smaller buildings to have the resources that they need in order to make some of these changes as cost effective as possible. I mean, as you well know, John, oftentimes the benefits of this, they actually do pencil out, right? So if a building owner can be made aware of incentives and the benefits of some of these transformations, it's something they might be willing to take on as long as it can feel logistically simple. And that's something we're hoping that the NYC Accelerator can help provide, particularly in neighborhoods, environmental justice communities that are sort of, we really want to be bringing into the energy transition, and that have a lot to gain from the sort of air quality benefits and affordability benefits that come from getting some of these changes done.
Do you see certain job markets or job categories or skilled trades that we need to ramp up in particular to meet the goals of Local Law 97 and beyond?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think there's obviously going to be an enormous amount of work in boiler changes and heating and cooling systems. We think there's an enormous amount of work for solar installations and battery storage professionals. And a lot of this is going to be driven by the demand that will come. But we need to be ready with training programs and supports, whether it's through our union partners in all of this work, or just the sort of broader building trades and skilled workers. We need to be supporting them as they ramp up and bring a lot more people into those job categories, and make sure that we're all creating as much opportunity as we can in the transformations that we're looking to achieve.
So what else is on the mayor's list? What's your priorities and what you're going to be working on over the next 6-7 months?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of identified this, right? Local Law 97 looms large in everybody's mind. We really want to be getting as much certainty as possible, as soon as possible, and that's going to be an iterative process. We're really pleased to see the technical assistance and financing programs launched. That was a big priority to make sure we really move that forward. And we really want to be cleaning up the grid. So there's a real question about making sure that we can achieve some sort of agreement before the end of the year to bring some of these large scale renewables into the 5 boroughs in partnership with NYCERDA and others. And really, thinking about working with the council to think about the next phases of this. There's pieces of, as I mentioned, the putting an end date for fossil fuel usage in new buildings. That's something that we really like to work with the council on, and thinking about the next phases of electrifying our building stock and doing a little bit of thinking on the sort of smaller building side as you imagine. So it's a large agenda that's largely on the building side. We obviously think a lot about the transportation transformations that we're doing, a little bit on the waste side. And all of that is work that our office is moving forward to move as fast and as quickly as we can to this carbon neutral future.
Great. So the final two questions for me, and they're related before we get to the audience questions. Ben, what do you think is the largest barrier to net zero in New York City?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think fundamentally, one that I would identify is, Massachusetts and New York City use about the same amount of energy. But Massachusetts has more than 25 times the amount of land in order to generate and provide that electricity. So much of what we need, because we're so high density, requires bringing in large amounts of new energy into the 5 boroughs. And that is a sort of fundamental bottleneck in decarbonizing everything that we're looking to do. But the exciting thing is, as I mentioned, urban growth in and of itself is a low carbon way of growing. It's a low carbon way of living. And so on some basic level, one of the major things New York City can do is to continue to provide homes for people who are interested in living here to come and move here and live in these sort of low carbon, relatively low carbon ways. And in some basic fundamental way, when New York City succeeds, that's also a sustainable living succeeding. And so that's a very relaxing place to be in a lot of ways.
So let's talk about the flip side of that. What do you think is our greatest opportunity to net zero in New York City?
I think the people of the 5 boroughs and the professionals that exist here are the greatest potential. We have been at the forefront of previous energy transformations, right? In the 1880s, when Thomas Edison launched the Pearl Street substation, all of the buildings in I guess it wasn't the 5 boroughs then, all the buildings in New York at that point were lit by whale oil, and Thomas Edison was at the forefront of shifting that from whale oil to electric lighting. And that's something that happened in New York City. Similarly, right now, New York City has some of the most thoughtful and creative and ambitious developers and labor unions and design professionals, architects, engineers, right? And people who come to urban green convenings and think about this work. And so it's a real possibility for us to be thinking creatively about how to decarbonize our own city, and then really providing a model to cities around the world. So many of our buildings, the overwhelming majority, are still going to be here in 2050, and so that means we're going to need to take action to reduce emissions from them. And if we can show how it can be done in New York City, it's something that we can be showing and providing services to the rest of the world. So that's how I see the real possibilities here.
That's great. I mean, I completely agree. Cities are the engines of innovation, and New York has always been a leader there, and I know you and I both agree that it will remain a leader in that category. Let's get to the audience questions. First one here, got 6 upvotes, is building owners seem to be waiting due to this lack of motivation or hope that rules will be rolled back. So what messages do you have, or how do we create a sense of urgency that we need to act?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, this sense a lot. I think there's a real imperative, both because of Local Law 97 and the realities of the law, but really more importantly, we look at the International Energy Agency's narrow but achievable path. We think about what is really necessary to achieve deep decarbonization. We think about all of the incredible co-benefits that can come from achieving deep decarbonization, whether it's air quality, tenant comfort, just the high quality ways in which we can be living and working in high quality, efficient spaces. And I think under any circumstance, whether it's through Local Law 97 or just because of the ways in which humanity and the United States are going to be racing towards decarbonization, these changes are gonna have to be made. And I think it behooves all of us as professionals to think about the ways in which we can be future-proofing our buildings, making sure that the buildings that we operate and live and work in are ready for a much lower carbon future. And there's an incredible opportunity to be leading the way here. Building owners that make the changes that are needed can be demonstrating to others the possibilities here. And really, we're all need to be doing our part to achieve the types of deep decarbonization that are necessary. You know, I talk a lot about the benefits of this, but on some basic level, I wish that climate change were not happening. I wish that we could not have to worry about this. But the realities of it are looming quite large. And you know, from heat waves in the Pacific Northwest and on the West Coast to some of the very harrowing dynamics just in the 5 boroughs in the past couple of weeks. You know, I think we need to be clear-eyed about the challenge that we face, and clear-eyed about the necessity for all of us to sort of be coming together to take action and transform. You know, I think the Climate Mobilization Act was, you know, it uses this term mobilization, and I don't love martial metaphors, but there is this notion that we're all coming together in order to transform things in a way that will protect our future. You know, I had a daughter who was born just last year in 2020, and I think about her life and thinking about, you know, in the year 2050, where you know, all the scientists sort of agree that we really need to be well on our way towards deep decarbonization by the time 2050 rolls around. And she'll just be 30 years old, really just starting her career and thinking a little bit about what her future looks like. And it would be a really glorious thing if she didn't really have to worry about climate change that much. But I think that would require those of us who are in our professional lives right now. You know, the next 30 years is a long time, but it's not an enormous amount of time. And it really is about the length of a career. And so it is this generation's professionals who are going to be tackling this challenge. And it's something we all need to be sort of coming together to figure out, because it's, you know, we really can't wait. It really has to be us, and it really has to be in our working lives.
So the next question is probably not a fair question, but do you see any changes with the new mayor in 2022? Of course, there's going to be changes with the mayor. We don't know what they're going to be. So you're welcome to answer that question, but maybe walk us through what the process is in doing the handoff of the baton from your office to the next mayor, particularly as it relates to the issues we've been talking about.
I mean, something that I feel very heartened by is that the entire field of Democratic candidates, including Borough President Adams, has articulated a real desire for New York to continue to be a leader in climate change. And I'm really heartened to see everybody's enthusiasm on this issue. You know, I think it behooves all of us to be moving forward on all the pieces that we know are going to be needed to achieve our really ambitious climate goals. And we're going to be working with the team that's coming into place to make sure that they understand the landscape and can be continuing to take really ambitious climate action, because I know it's a goal that we all share, to have New York continue to be a leader and for us to continue to move this really important work forward. Thanks.
Here's a good question that we look at all the time. How do we overcome the large difference in price between gas and electricity?
Yeah.
Particularly for this transition, and is there anything the city can do to add a price signal?
Yeah, I think on some basic level, there's going to be an enormous amount of innovation and transformation on the electricity side in order to provide the highest quality, lowest cost electricity as possible. I think Local Law 97 in a lot of ways creates an incentive structure that really encourages folks to be shifting away to lower carbon sources of energy for their heating and cooling. And I think it behooves all of us to make sure, whether it's through regulatory proceedings or otherwise, that folks who are going to be shifting from gas to electric for their heating needs in particular, that the rates are structured in such a way that it protects the most vulnerable New Yorkers, folks who are really energy burdened, and that we're achieving this transition in a thoughtful and equitable way. So folks who might have more challenging lives and it might be harder for them to pay are really protected from the costs of this transition.
Next question is about technology, and we're seeing a lot of it, and that's what we hoped that, you know, in my opinion, our opinion, urban green technology is a big answer for how we're going to get up to net zero. We're seeing nanotechnologies, we're seeing phase change materials, we're seeing things that, you know, we couldn't even imagine 5 or 10 years ago. So the question is, will the Department of Buildings officials be flexible in allowing new technologies and system approaches for retrofits? So maybe talk through, you know, how the city thinks about these new technologies and how you know, they can be encouraged or at least allowed in the sense for compliance for Local Law 97 and what we need to do.
Yeah, John, I totally agree, and I think we share that value that a lot of the solutions that are going to be crucial for achieving carbon neutrality, net zero, are things that are going to be developed and deployed over the next over the sort of years to come. But that being said, I think the Department of Buildings really stands ready to be flexible and open-minded on different ways that folks can be meeting these really ambitious targets. Gina Boca and her team and the whole team at the Department of Buildings who's charged with thinking about new technologies, I think they really aspire to be thoughtful and flexible and work with industry in order to adopt new practices to achieve these goals. And it's certainly something that our office is looking to support them in any way we can. Because I think you're absolutely right that the pieces that are going to be required are things that are in development right now, and we want to be making sure that New York City can adopt the most creative techniques here.
Maybe just a follow-on to that. What do you think the role of carbon capture technologies are in an urban setting like New York?
Yeah, I think it's something that is interesting. I think it's something that we want to take a look at. And on some fundamental basic level, I'm of the mind that if it works, it works. And if it is keeping emissions from going into the atmosphere and stopping emissions that contribute to climate change, it's really something we should take a look at. I mean, you hear criticism that carbon capture helps people to avoid sort of tougher decisions or transitioning more quickly to cleaner, renewable, or more efficient practices. My sense is that we really are going to need all of these things. I mean, the targets are so challenging. The imperative is so deep that we really should be embracing every tool in the toolkit, and perhaps there's a real role for technologies like that. But we really need to be embracing everything and being in a posture of saying yes to any techniques they're going to help us achieve these really challenging goals.
Yeah, on the issue of carbon capture, I'm kind of enamored by it. There's no doubt we have to shrink our carbon footprint. We've got to get as far down as we go. But recognize what Paris Climate Agreement is all about. When you get to 2050, we're still going to be emitting carbon, and so whatever we emit, we have to take out of the air. And it's these carbon capture technologies that we have to find a way to get the scale. The challenges obviously are in urban settings, but lots of technology development to happen there. Next question here is, how do we balance the need to decarbonize multifamily buildings with the need to make basic health and safety upgrades in affordable housing?
The very unsatisfying answer is we desperately need to do both of those things. And I think in many cases, the types of changes that are needed in order to decarbonize are the types of things that could improve the interior comfort, the health of the building, the reliability of the building systems. And I think we need to be doing both of these things at the same time. Obviously, people deserve high quality places to live, and we need to be working diligently in partnership with HPD and the affordable housing agencies and with landlords all across the city to make sure that people are living in high quality habitable spaces that are as healthy as possible, and also that they're decarbonizing as quickly as possible.
Next question here related. So what is the potential for site renewable energy in New York City?
I think we need to be embracing every tool we can. If there's high quality opportunities to be generating clean and renewable power in the 5 boroughs, it's something we should be taking a look at and embracing. The challenges are so daunting, as I keep saying, that we really can't afford to be picky about techniques or methods. We need to be embracing it all.
Great. Here's a question about incentives and grants. What offers can be made to building owners in financial hardships to help with these transitions?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's something that comes up a lot. We were very heartened to see just recently some state level funding that the governor announced to support some types of changes in buildings. And we think there's going to be a role to play for incentives at the state and utility level, perhaps at the federal level as well, coming out of a reconciliation or an infrastructure package. And we think that there's a lot of the role that commercial PACE, for example, provides, is to provide that sort of higher quality incentives to be supporting building owners and getting this work done. We think there's a role for everything, and I think partnering with other levels of government, with the utilities, to get resources to buildings who are seeking to make these changes is a big part of the work ahead.
Next question here is about resiliency. So we have, we're coming up on 10 years of Sandy. Bring us up to date on, how the city's thinking about resiliency. You mentioned the storms we saw. I mean, the storms are getting crazier and crazier every year. How should we be thinking about resiliency? What should we be looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. We work really closely with Janie Bavishi in the Office of Climate Resiliency as they think about not just preparing New York City for coastal storms and the changes to our shoreline, but really thinking about how the city will adapt to much hotter temperatures, daytime and nighttime heat temperatures into the future. I think it's got to be a multi-pronged approach, right? It's thinking about sea level rise and the way our coastlines will be changing. It's thinking about coastal protection projects. There's a lot of really high quality projects that are advancing across the 5 boroughs. There's going to need to be a whole lot more of that in the years to come. And it's thinking about ways in which we can be making sure that people have access to cooler interior spaces so they don't overheat, to make sure our neighborhoods are cooler with more reflective surfaces, more street trees. And on some fundamental level, it's really thinking about social resiliency, right? So much of, there's been some incredible research about why heat deaths happen when heat waves happen. And a lot of it comes down to how connected we are as people, how many relationships folks have as people aged, and making sure that people are able to check in on each other and support each other. It sounds a little bit cheesy, but genuinely friendships and neighbors are some of the most important resiliency tools we have to make sure we're looking out for each other and coming together in challenging times. And I think we saw some of that during COVID, and I think that there'll be important levels of social supports and social resiliency that is going to be really important for us to be building and developing as we go forward into the future. It's physical changes, it's social changes, and it's thinking about how and where we build. Another thing I should probably mention, of course, is we recently codified the climate resiliency design guidelines for city facilities, right? Thinking about the ways in which the future, both weather patterns and climatic dynamics and sea level rise will be changing our city, and making sure that when we're building public facilities, we're building with those changes in mind. And that's something the utilities are doing analogous work, as well as the MTA and the Port Authority, right? All of the entities that think about building long-term infrastructure in the city, all of us are sort of working together to make sure that we're not just stopping climate change, but anticipating the changes that are going to come in the way we construct our public works.
So direct follow-on question here, Ben. It says, do you see cooling as an essential service going forward? You just talked about that. And how does this balance and work into decarbonization plans?
It's a great question, but I think on some fundamental level, it's easy to tie ourselves in knots about this. But I think people, as the climate gets hotter, people are going to need cool interior spaces, and we're going to need to figure out a way to make sure that people have access to cool interior spaces, that their health and safety is protected. Obviously, it will require some amounts of differing energy load at a slightly different peak period, but that's just something we're going to have to be incorporating into our future planning and making sure that people are able to achieve the cool interior spaces that they need in order to stay healthy and survive. I think thinking about access to cooling as a place where we would try to be reducing our energy use or restricting people from that feels like the wrong place we should be looking for emissions reductions. On the other hand, of course, we need to be making sure that those cooling technologies can be provided in the highest quality and most efficient way. Phasing out CFCs and HFCs in cooling technologies, I think is an important role of that, to make sure we're not excessively exacerbating or unnecessarily exacerbating climate change as we keep interiors cool. But it's obviously a sort of fundamental right that people have to cool and comfortable spaces and keeping them healthy. And as the world gets hotter, it's going to be even more imperative for folks to have access to to that, just so they can stay healthy and thrive in a warming world.
There's a question on workforce development. Does the city have a plan for workforce development to make sure we have enough trained people available to do the work that needs to get done?
Yeah, there's some terrific thinking that's happening in partnership with the Department of Small Business Services, which has workforce training programs with EDC. Our partners at the Building Energy Exchange think a lot about the sort of professional level skill development that's going to be needed, and it's something that as the demand ramps up, we're going to be in partnership with labor and the crafts unions to think about all of these pieces. We really want to make sure that as we do all of this work, that folks are able to be brought in to achieve some of to be partners in achieving the deep carbon emission reductions, and high quality workforce training, and making sure that people get the skills that they need, not just people becoming a certain category of worker, but existing workers in particular industries, making sure that they are upskilled and get the skills that they need so they can work on the new technologies, the new techniques that are going to be needed in transforming some of these building systems.
What about, we see a lot of attention being focused on heat pump technologies specifically. Is that, has the city identified specific trades that we need to be focusing on to ramp up workforce development, like heat pump installation?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that heat pumps are going to be a crucial tool, both all across the building stock in order to reduce emissions, and there's going to be a lot of work to do to make sure that we have the workforce that we need to install those heat pumps and get that moving. And I think it's just one example of all the different changes in skills and new job categories that are going to be needed for all the different technologies that folks are going to be adopting. So there's going to be more to come on that.
Next question here. What are the ways that are being explored to encourage and support energy efficiency improvements in affordable housing and rent stabilized buildings?
Yeah, there's some terrific programs that are run through the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, ways in which as affordable housing and rent stabilized buildings are coming in to get capital from the city to support new rent regulatory agreements on their side, making sure that the capital investments are done in a way that has the highest efficiency standards associated with them. As you well know, Local Law 97 has a set of checklist items that we're hoping the affordable housing stock is going to be adopting, and we stand ready to support them with incentives and technical assistance to help get that work done. A lot of the incentives or a lot of the changes that are possible in affordable housing make operating costs a lot lower, which can be really good for the business models of operating affordable housing. And so we think there's a lot of appetite. We think there's a lot of work to do, and we have really great partners across city agencies to help get that done.
We've been talking a lot about electrification of buildings, but at the same time, there's this complete revolution in the electrification of transportation, particularly cars. Have you thought about how are all these electric vehicles going to meet the building? Are there concerns that we should be thinking about, or longer term plans to accommodate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we think a lot about vehicle charging. Obviously, in the 5 boroughs, as I mentioned, an enormous number of us get around on the I call it high capacity fixed route electrified mobility, which is the subway, obviously. And so saving our subway and making sure that it's a high quality engine of growth going forward, that's a key way that New York City is going to be continuing, extending the electrification of transportation. But on the vehicle side, I think you're right that the future of cars and trucks is electric cars and trucks, and the basic use cases right now, at least, the overwhelming, a majority of chargers are likely going to end up being for folks who have driveways where a car is parked overnight, they can charge overnight. That's true of a lot of folks in the 5 boroughs who have a driveway, have a place where a car can rest overnight. The slightly more challenging dynamics around folks who park on the street. Just this past month, actually, we launched our first curbside level 2 charging pilot with Con Edison. We think there's a lot of interesting possibilities there. But just overall, as you said, we want to make sure that parking spaces and parking lots are ready to have chargers installed, which is why the mayor talked about working with the council to pass legislation to make every parking lot in New York City electric vehicle EV ready, and requiring the installation of chargers in a lot of those in a lot of those spots as well. I think this is a major transformation that's underway. There have been a couple of fits and starts in the vehicle electrification over the past decades, but I genuinely feel that right now we're really at a tipping point where, based on everything that the automotive industry is saying, the goals that they're setting, the very clear federal direction, I think we're about to see a decade of really accelerating vehicle electrification. And we're going to be working with Con Edison and our electric utilities, with building owners and with the Department of Transportation and others to make sure that the 5 boroughs are ready to accept a lot of electric vehicles. It's going to be crucial to deep decarbonization.
Yeah, as we talk about electrification, there's a question here about greening the grid. It reminds me. Just a lot of people are skeptical that renewable power is ever going to come. It'll shock you that New Yorkers are skeptics. But we do have to overcome this sense that, are these projects real or not? So, what are the building blocks for a green grid in New York City? When do you see them rolling out?
Yeah, I think, we are working in really close partnership with the state on a lot of these questions. There's going to be major need, as I mentioned, for us to be bringing in clean and renewable electricity from outside the 5 boroughs. And there's going to be an enormous need for us to be generating as much as we can on rooftops in the 5 boroughs. And there's an enormous amount of opportunity on the coasts or off our coasts in the form of offshore wind. So, the state has set really aggressive targets for 2030. The federal government has set really aggressive targets. And we're going to be working with all of these partners to achieve as much as we can, as quickly as we can. So that's, rooftop solar and battery storage in the 5 boroughs. It's offshore wind off our coasts with workforce supported at places like South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. It's upstate clean and renewable electricity brought into the 5 boroughs with new transmission lines, and it's potentially tapping into sources of large-scale renewable electricity in the form of Canadian hydropower or other sort of large-scale sources of clean and renewable electricity from north of the city.
And so, how can the city help either facilitate or accelerate or incentivize the delivery of all that power into New York?
Yeah, I think we play a couple of different roles, as I mentioned, right? It's advocacy. As the NYCO and others are doing grid planning, it's working with the Public Service Commission to have these projects approved and brought in, and it's thinking about ways to use our purchasing power in order to accelerate and catalyze some of these investments, and it's making sure that in the 5 boroughs, we're providing a friendly regulatory environment so that solar and increasingly battery storage can be adopted by building owners and developers in the 5 boroughs.
Great. Well, Ben, we're at the end of our hour already. I want to thank our audience for all the great questions. And Ben, I want to thank you for a really, really informative session. Thanks for spending the morning with Urban Green today.
Thanks so much, John. This was terrific, and really thank you for all your work. And to everyone listening on the phone, thanks for everything that you're all working on and doing to decarbonize our city. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Ben. We've got some great upcoming events coming up. We have our G-Pro Fundamentals of Green Building coming up on July 22. Make sure you check that out. And then related to today's conversation, on July 29th, we have our Local Law 97 All the Basics webinar, where we'll run through everything that you need to know about Local Law 97 to understand the law and where it's going. That's a great webinar. Check that out too. So thank you to Ben. I also want to thank all of you for joining us today. Today's program is a great example of the work we do at Urban Green. We take on the biggest challenges with the biggest solutions to have the biggest impact. We do that in 4 key ways. We convene, we research, we advocate, and we educate. If you're not a member already, check us out to support our work. Thanks for joining. Stay safe. Have a great day.